Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Uncharted, Sales Uncharted, right? Now, when I was thinking about who I'd like to get on as guests, I knew one thing for sure. I want to go away and do something very different. So here's an interesting person that I actually met at a Gamma Labs cohort. This was Gamma's first cohort that they set up in SFO, and I was very excited. Even before landing there was this energy that I kept getting from the United Kingdom. And I'm like, who is Irina Gokh? And I said, this is interesting. So she lands, I land, and we actually hit it off. And I got so much knowledge and insights from her. As an academic, she is astounding at the work that she does. But I'm going to talk less about that and just want you to listen very carefully to someone who comes from academia and who I'm actually going to now talk about sales and see what she can share with us. And when I was asking her, hey, Irina, if I would invite you to my talk, what would the title potentially look like? And she came up with this mouthful: Beyond Bullet Points, an educator's take on sales, storytelling, and global business. Now, I paused for a second, then I said, as an ex-salesperson, Deepak, do you like long titles like that? The answer is no. But wait a minute, isn't that cool? I really was intrigued. So I said to her, you know what? I'm not going to caution you. I'm not going to put you in a box. I actually want you to come and just share what's in your heart and how can you connect it back to sales. And as she talks, team, I will connect it back to sales. I'm going to ask a few challenging questions. If we meander off, just bear with us. We're going to have a lot of fun today. Irina, with that, I really hope I could live up to your standards in terms of that introduction. Do you want to take a minute just to talk about yourself and tell you how you got into academia?
Thank you very much, Deepak. I did my PhD in international business management, and that what led me to my current job where I work. I'm associate professor. I am associate head of school where I lead student experience. And I'm also a national teaching fellow, which is the most prestigious UK award for those who are teaching in higher education.
We are not worthy. We are not worthy.
You absolutely are. It's fantastic to be here and talk about the amalgamation of sales and education and how we can actually find a common thread between the two.
Yep. And so to help us beyond that, why did you come up with beyond bullet points, right? And to me, honestly, I always say that bullet points never inspired anyone, right? It's more like slogans and so on. So what's the genesis behind that thought process? Where did that come from?
If I ask a question, what is the common thing between sales and education? Like what unites the two fields? It's the ability to cut the noise. If you ask students what are those things that they don't like when we do lectures, they don't like slides where they can read all the information themselves, because why they would be there? Why they need a lecturer there? If we talk about sales, if I know all the features myself about the product that you're selling, or I can read the label, why do you need to tell that to me? So that is what I think about bullet points. It's about cutting through the noise where you tell your story in a meaningful way.
This is really interesting. One of the first things we tell B2B sellers is, guys, don't lead with features. Lead with the benefits that you're going to get to it. And as you talk, it actually struck me. If I overlay that language onto what you said, the way I interpret what you're saying is as follows. If you're listing out features, hey, cool. But guess what? People can read features off from the label, from the product data sheets, and so on. Where's that story? What tells the student that what is coming is now going to be so profound, so different, and is going to solve some problem? So, when you think about designing learning that you deploy, right? What kind of principles are you putting in place, on the designing side of things? And any parallels from that you would stretch to sales per se?
When I think about it's a very good question. And when I think about it and I do the learning design, it's part of my job. I am teaching
Mhm.
students. I think about emotions. There are so many things that I want to tell my students. There are so many features that I want to list. And in my world, those are theories, concepts, ideas. I want to share them with you because I've learned them. But then when I do that, when I kind of make a step back and I try to think, if I will pour all that knowledge in a logical way, will they listen? Will they buy into what I'm saying? And they probably not, because in order to build that trust, you need to lead with emotions. So you need to make them comfortable with trying to learn new things, because those are not easy things and there are high
Agree.
stakes. Also, there is a cost to that. And I guess that another thing that I do, I try to show my students the future, them, because I understand the journey, and I understand the difference between students at different stages, and I guess that that could be something similar with sales. You understand the end result that may not actually be the end at all, because you may want to follow up with that person with whom you made a deal. But and I think that you should, but what you've done before that, equally important. Can you map out that journey, but can you also make it meaningful, emotionally coherent to that person?
I really like that, Irina. I really like that because so I am actually a Sandler certified coach, and one of the things we talk about with Sandler is you talk in the present, but you're actually painting the future.
Mm.
I am going to give you a product or a service that is going to do something for you. It's going to it's going to, let's say, solve a current pain, a current issue. But I'm also going to give you a vision for what it could potentially look like 6 months from now when that pain is gone from the system. So as you spoke, it just came out to me pop. So great storytelling, if I understand you correctly, is not just about talking about the so-called features of what you have right now, but is that future state. Is your story setting things up that you can see 6 months, 1 year down the road? How would life look like if this, what you're being taught or shown today, were to be deployed? And I think any salesperson listening on this call would absolutely say, yes, that makes a lot of sense. Because until the customer is not 6 months or 6 steps ahead of you, thinking about success, imagining what the success would look like, today's message will fall flat. So finding that balance is so powerful, so powerful. Now, if I were to push you on that a bit more, right? Now, we're going from academia, right? Now, if I were to ask a simple question, when you design learning to make it stick, I got a lot of tips from you there, right? Now, what type of design have you seen that fails that would actually tell you that, I did these some experiments, Deepak, I tried this and I've noticed it fails. And then say whether you're able to connect that to back to how sales training programs might possibly fail.
In education, obviously, we have different types of students. We have groups of students that you could say, or we have, for example, one of the common thing is age. Majority of students are who I teach are currently Gen Z. At the same time, if I'm connecting it with other types of learning that we do, we have millennials, we have Generation X, we have even baby boomers. So everyone, and all of them, they joining different types of, they have different needs. Some are doing MBA, some are doing apprenticeships, some are doing undergraduate degree, you have a mixture. But if I think about the cohort of students that, for example, I'm teaching, majority of them are Gen Z students. So the learning that is the learning design that, in my view, fails is when you fail to recognize who are your students are. What do
Mm,
they need? Because the way I'm going to teach a 20 years old level 6 student, third year students who is about to graduate and looking for a job, is not going to be the same when I'm going to teach someone who is currently, let's say, working in an organization and they want to do an apprenticeship and they want to understand completely different things. So when we talk about MBA, even, that's not the
yeah.
same type of learning they expect from me. So know who your customer is.
Boom. And I think that is exactly the sound bite that I was hoping you would break for me. So here's a really interesting thing. Salespeople look at their audience, right? And I think you just gave a great example of that. This is not unique to sales. A great educator also looks at their audience and who that message needs to be to. So if I am a salesperson listening to this call, I think my synopsis of you and connecting back to sales is pretty simple. Who is your audience? Understand your audience. And in sales, we typically have these phrases we use, Irina, things like, who is your internal coach? There's always, out of the 10 people that are on this decision committee, right? There's going to be someone that is extremely powerful, but also very open and candid with you. Let's call him the coach who can guide you on it. Then there are people in that organization who not are maybe on the fence. They're not so sure about you, but there are some that are definitely working with your competition, per se, lean towards the competition. That level of analysis, understanding the circle of influence and who matters where, is actually extremely profoundly important for salespeople. In fact, many, many, many tools out there, you'll be amazed to learn. Salespeople now have at their disposal multiple tools that even looked at LinkedIn profiles and try to give them a perspective of how to tone your pitch, how to position things depending on the person's profile.
Mm,
Why? Because in sales, that matters.
yes.
And I'm really grateful that you actually raised the point that not just sales, it really matters. As someone who takes her art very seriously, you're actually spending a lot of time in understanding. For salespeople, then it just means that, hey, we just got some validation here, something you need to do. Now, I really like this, but now let's talk about something even, let's step into this a bit more with you, right? Now, if I would ask you for a storytelling framework, something that you have used, right? Say, and there's a magic potion, Deepak, a little bit of A, a little bit of B, a little bit of C. What would that magic potion be that you think a salesperson can get from you that allows him to say, I think I'm getting to a point where I know how to, articulate my message? What would that look like, sound like?
Wow, that's a deep question, I would say. Uh,
Yes, and I'm writing it down so I can, copyright that formula or patent it.
it's very difficult one. Storytelling technique. I think that basically you need to change, you need to go from information delivery to behavioral change.
Yeah,
In depending on what you do, your story, of course, will be different. But you need to start with something that is meaningfully important to your audience. Again, I, as an academic, as an educator, I have to be very specific and mindful of how I frame myself and how I talk about it. But if, let's say, we talk about some of the recent examples that come to my mind when I wanted to talk to my students about emerging markets and the power of economic opportunities there, I showed them different projects of how infrastructural, different elements of infrastructure were built in partnership with different countries, and how important that is for economic development, and how you could be potentially part of that project in some time if you want to. So that's how you can get involved, and you show all of that to make them think, oh. There is something there. So it's not, I don't actually need to remember those numbers, but I will definitely remember that very important bridge that made people, that made
correct.
the crossing of that bridge easier and cross from one
Yeah,
place to another,
yeah.
enabling a lot of opportunities. And then you do your core stuff that may actually involve something that you have to say, but at the end, you need to change their behavior. You need to make them see themselves in there, and that would be my way of designing that learning, that journey. You
It's,
basically take them on a journey with you, and depending on what you do, the
yeah.
level of your involvement in that journey is different.
So, as you were speaking and as you spoke about, you show them applications or cases where things have been done before. It like a light bulb went off in my mind because in sales, we typically talk about what we call, user stories in the sense that I have a customer success story, a case study. Hey, Mr. Current customer that I'm speaking to. By the way, I want to show you application of the work that we do in environment A, customer B, and domain C. And this is the benefits or that is that connective tissue that you're talking about. When people see something in parallel done by something else, and I think that makes it really relevant. Hey, like as you excitedly pointed, hey, wait a minute. I see that. I see myself in that. So therefore, I can connect the dots. And I think that's a very powerful message. One more thing that came to my mind as you were talking, I think this is one of the messages I always give to salespeople is that if you focus on some of the words you used, I can literally think about the power of third party storytelling, right? It's like, so guys, I know we're talking about the UK economy at this point, but I want you to let me tell you a story about how I saw this going down with Argentina. And now you start talking about Argentina, but you use phrases that apply back to the UK side of things as well. So now instead of you critiquing UK directly and getting pushback from the team, they suddenly start listening. They all lean forward because no one's now saying you bashing the UK or its economic policies, but drawing parallels with a safe conversation. And I think this is what one of the things I always tell salespeople is that when you're doing great storytelling, if you want to contradict your customer or you want to challenge your customer, challenge it in a way which is very unique. And that's kind of the vibe I got from you. Bring in your user studies from outside, make it
Yes.
safe. Let's talk about that and let you see I get the connection between that. And I think that's a smart way of doing it.
And
Go
there
ahead.
is there is something else that, as you are talking now, I guess one of those key things, as a kind of that runs as a red line through what I said about from information to behavioral change, you have to be actually believing in what you're saying. So you have to be as passionate about that subject as you want your students, customers to be. I
Wow.
am there, and I am equally invested in what I'm saying, as you would probably imagine people who are doing sales would be too, because they believe in the product that they sell. They believe that that product will make my life better.
Wow, I'm actually quiet because I actually now see the connection very well done. For me, one of the biggest things I've always coached salespeople on is that if your energy is not there, or if you are showing some doubt, as an example, the classic miss that salespeople do is on pricing, as an example, Arena, right? So you show them this, and now someone speaks pricing, and in your mind, you're now concerned because there's some head trash in there as a salesperson. Oh, this is typically where I lose my deal because the second I mention the price, the customer always reacts, oh no, it's going to happen again. And that lack of belief or that over predictability of what could go wrong is typically where salespeople fail. You have primed yourself ready for that reaction. And here's the bad news, because you believe in it already, you will say something and you say it in such a way that the customer senses it. And there's no AI that can do that. It's only humans who can do that. And we'll talk about AI later as well, Arina, because you're a big proponent of AI and you use it quite a lot in the work that you do. Now I'm going to kind of move on here. So if you were to design a sales program, right, and you were to design it, if you could just summarize for me, how do you avoid, or let's put it this way, behavioral change rather than information overload? I know you touched upon it earlier, but could you just recapture it for me a bit better in terms of we have some principles from you, right? Make it easy to digest, make it so on. What would you say that leaders need to do to ensure that the training they put together for their people is making a lot of sense? What feedback loop should they have in mind when they put training together? I hope that clarifies my question.
Yes, it's a very good question. And what I have now in my mind is a song by One Republic. There is one particular line in that song that I believe summarize and captures the essence of what I'm about to say. Take the pain, but don't suffer.
The pain
And
would
what I mean
suffer.
by that is when you think about designing any form of training where people actually go away with something, you have to make them feel something. The deeper they feel them, what they're doing, the more they will take away. It's not about specific mark. It's not about whether they were able to accomplish a specific task. It has nothing to do with that. It is about their own self, let's say, the reflection and the pain, because it's always painful to learn. That's the most ridiculous and thing that I don't know, but sometimes I'm sitting on my own and learning something, like, for example, with artificial intelligence, and it's incredibly hard. It's just difficult, and you feel all sorts of emotions. So if you can, or not you can, that's what you should do. The learning should have that element of emotional transformation, emotional journey, where there are twists on the way, where suddenly roles change. You've done something. You're believing that you're, say you design something, and that's how it should be done, and suddenly everything changes. A new regulation introduced, or a new law introduced, or a new set of rules introduced, thrown at you, and now you kind of, oh, but does it mean that my logic was incorrect? Does it mean that that's not actually what I should have been doing? Again, the result doesn't matter. What matters is how did you think about it? What kind of things you felt? Because you will remember that.
You know, Arena, as you said that, I'm going to go back to another sales principle that we have a lot. If you walk into any Barnes and Noble or any bookstore, right, and you walk up to the sales section, you will stand there in awe of the titles there. The titles are going to be fanatical prospecting, and Jeb Blount is the author for that, and I love his work, right? You're going to get a document that will simply say 100 ways to beat any objection, right? Because what has happened to salespeople is that salespeople are being taught technique at a granular level. Let's step back for a second there. And you just said something really powerful. Things change. New variables get introduced. Variables you thought existed disappear. And with AI, things are changing so fast, so quick. What frameworks are you learning and adopting? And I think that was a message that I would like to pass back to sales leaders out there who are thinking about training rather than deciding about those granular techniques, because the script always fails. That's my opinion. And it fails typically at the rookie level. You've been given this 30 lines to repeat, and when the customer says something ad lib or completely off the script, you're like, and to me, that's the danger. So one of the things I've realized, and this is a powerful message you just shared that I want to just make sure the guys on the call and ladies on the call understand is when it comes to sale, yes, in sales, granularity helps and scripts help. They build a great baseline. But if you are a novice moving into becoming an astute professional, my guidance would be rise to the framework level. A framework gives you the power to accommodate, adjust with any changes that may occur underneath. And ultimately, that's when you realize it's like being on a stage arena, right? And on the stage, you have X marks the spot. You're actor A and you're actress B. And I miss my line. You look at me and you know I miss my line because you knew the script. But in real life, salespeople forget one thing. They may miss the script. Now they get nervous. They actually don't realize your seller did not see, the buyer did not see that. You as the seller know that because you missed it. This is why I tell the guys, rise one step ahead, look at frameworks. Frameworks and the way you handle objections using a framework or that lens is always more powerful. Now, let's go back to some of the things that you've done which have really given you credence in the work that you do. You worked across borders. You have done work in Russia. You're now in academia in the UK. What lessons and communication aspects have you noticed, right, that travel well across cultures, specific to communication? I mean, talking, storytelling, those bullet points that you made. What works well across cultures? There are salespeople on this call who sell across countries and so on, right? What have you seen in terms of a commonality amongst the human species or whatever?
Another very good question. Curiosity comes to mind. If you're naturally curious about another human being, then that's probably it. We can, if you do that, if that is something that you naturally have, everything else will be so easy because that would builds genuine connection. And wherever you go, that curiosity about another human being is something that we all have. Obviously, language and different cultural expectations that are important, but I'm not always getting that right. And I sometimes feel that, especially when I've recently been to the US, it's not my first time in the US, but sometimes I would make some jokes and say things, and people would instead it was like an irony, but it didn't land as irony. It landed as a joke that I'm actually, that's what I think, but no. And I guess that when you should be able to experiment safely, but not when your communication is part of the work deal. So in this case, when you're working, not when you're just enjoying life and meeting friends and meeting new people, you're networking, that's a different story. I think you should be yourself, but you should be curious about other people always. But when you're working, you should understand the language other people are talking. What I say is, I do not mean English itself. I mean the meaning, similar to what you were talking about, frameworks and granularity. It's not about specifics. It's not about words. It's about what those words mean, what they
Mean.
feel, how people experience them. And there is a very interesting framework that comes to mind that is called psychic distance. And it means that we could talk this, we could speak the same language, but there could be quite significant not mental distance, but psychological distance between us. And selling, so in terms of how we make deals, how we sell our products, how we talk about it, could have significant differences.
Okay.
I would try to use that to my advantage. So I would try to learn about who are those people, what is their culture, what kind of things they respect, what kind of things I respect, how can we move closer to each other, even if there is a significant difference. Sometimes the difference is big. So you could be geographically very close, but psychologically very different. Yeah,
That's a good point. My question's premise was geographical distance, and I think you actually made a very valid point there. You could be in the same room and still not be able to get the point across. So
yes,
this psychic communication, or the cycle, what do you call it? Psychic language or psychic
psychic
communication?
distance.
Psychic distance. That sounds really interesting to me. And it's a profound way of looking at it because, right, the word distance means you could be sitting next to someone and still be so far apart. That is surprising. I think that's a great method right there. I'm going to move to your PhD though, right? Because at the end of the day, let's put you on the spot on that one. Now, when I actually flipped through your PhD, a lot of it went over my head. And I also have a doctorate degree, but I really enjoyed it because you spoke about the balance between innovation versus efficiency when reorganizing globally. Now, a lot of salespeople on this call are thinking to themselves, okay, wait a minute. What does that even have to do with a sales conversation? I have no clue what innovation efficiency even means. Could you take a couple of minutes and just give us a perspective of what you were covering and then figure out a way to tell me how can sales teams learn to manage that same tension in their go-to-market or selling effort? See if you can bridge that gap for me in some context.
Let's imagine a multinational enterprise. Just imagine that. So multinational enterprise is a company that controls operations in different countries. And everything that they do happens in the public eye. That's another important distinction. So multinational enterprise takes money from country A, where they currently have that money in the form of a factory, takes money from that country A, people in country A potentially losing jobs. Multinational enterprise brings those money to country B, invests money there, creates a new factory, employs people there
Hmm.
getting jobs. When you see the whole chain, and potentially only if you're interested in that, all that information is usually public. There are lots of ways how you can get access to that. But if you see the kind of this logical chain, you start to understand that actually in one country, people you may create some bad economic situation for certain people who were employed, but in another country, you create a better condition. Public does not react. It's not a welcoming thing for a public. And I don't think that perception actually matters. I think that it can also matter for salespeople. How do you manage your perception? Because what you do, what the core of that thing that multinational did, they just realized that what they thought was a good investment no longer worked for them. How do you understand that? It's maybe a slightly different topic, but sometimes what you do is no longer working for you. You do not owe it. If you're a business person, you cannot stay, you cannot remain in that place that doesn't bring you the value. And quite arguably, I would also say that those people who you employ, maybe you could think about finding better opportunities for them. Maybe you would want to come back, or maybe you want to reorganize what you do. But you definitely see yourself fitting to another country that is welcoming you. Maybe that is where you would go. If you think about some other aspects, and now I'll try to bring it to sales. Multinational enterprise could have 400 of those investments around the world. For instance, I don't even think that it's the highest. It's just a specific company I have in mind. When they made decision to put all of those investments into the map, they made it with certain conditions in place at a certain time. But who knows how things will change? Innovation is what you have to constantly keep doing in order to ensure that there is a spot for you in the future, that you can survive. And sometimes that innovating pushes you to do things that from an observer eye looks illogical. Why would you decide to divest, meaning pull resources from
Resources from.
from a country that where things are profitable, and keep something that is unprofitable? Because it's not about those locations, because it's about simultaneously all 400 of them. That's what you do. You're not in one of those locations. You are a whole firm, and every single decision that you make is part of one. And efficiency is there to ensure that you retain enough control over what you do while you're innovating. So efficiency is paying your bills. Innovation, making sure that you have a spot in the future. And how salespeople can use it, things can change. That you've said it. The way you think about your scripts, it may not work tomorrow. You need that script so you can learn, but you also need to learn how to raise above it, how to create your own framework where you could innovate, where you understand that something doesn't work here. Maybe you have a customer who's very different psychologically from everyone else, but they're going to keep paying you and keep buying your product if they believe in you. And maybe you should actually learn from what they want. So that is the constant battle or balance between innovating, learning, at the same time being practical about what you do so you can retain control over
It's really
your.
interesting. As you were talking there, you gave a great example in terms of contextualizing it. And I just want to call out to the seller community listening in. I looked at your framework
Mm,
as a way to actually ask a very simple question. I am right now got a portfolio of accounts or portfolio of deals that I'm working on.
yeah.
And sometimes people forget efficiency also means choosing where to invest your time in.
Yes.
Qualify out from deals early. They save you a lot of pain later on. And this is what I try to explain to sales reps. If you think of yourself as an industry engineer, or as you said about efficiency and so on, right? Efficiency is predicated by knowing what to tackle and what to do. right? Anything that takes away from efficiency, brings the average down, get out of it, right?
Mm.
So if you have 10 machines in a row and there's one machine just constantly making a mess of it, you cannot, you don't need to fix the under nine, fix that one, and the average performance rises by default. And to me, qualification of deals, because people get confused between efficiency and noise. To them, dropping a deal or qualifying out is like a signal they failed. That's not true at all. In fact, the more discipline you show, that's actually an element of innovation. Being innovative forces you to actually think about where should you be investing your time. Time is not infinite. Time is finite. Ambition is infinite. And this is where the sales problem comes in. Because a lot of salespeople think of qualification as a face-saving gesture. I qualified out, or there's just too much effort going on here. It's just a matter of directing your resources to things that work, and that to me is efficiency, right? That makes a lot of sense. Now I'm going to dig in deeper there. So we talk about reallocating people, accounts, or
Yeah.
market focus, right? From a part of now, if I'm a sales leader, how can I take the work that you have done to make sense of this reallocation? We just spoke about a salesperson looking at his allocation of, let's say, portfolios, right? And deciding that if I have 100 deals that I can pursue, qualify out from those based on some very clean mechanical rules and focus on the rest and be innovative how you go about it. But for a sales leader, what would you say? What ideas can they do when reallocating people, accounts, or market force focus from the work you've done?
Mm. Think about your portfolio, or no, think about you or the team that you have. I don't know the specifics as piece of bread, but what gives you the most kind of profit or the meaningful activities that you do is butter. The butter, the size of that butter that you piece of butter that you have is going to stay the same because we have finite resources. You have 24 hours in a day. You are one person or you have a team of 10 people, but can you keep hiring, expanding? Probably not. But the piece of butter that you have could be expanded. You could keep bringing more and more and more.
Mhm.
And in spreading that, sorry, not piece of bread could be expanding by bringing more clients or trying to manage a bigger portfolio, but you will spread the butter thinner and thinner. Yes, exactly. But what else is happening? You're by inflating your what you try to kind of bring to your work, you're losing control because you can manage only what you can control. And that's why when we talk about multinational firms, you have different regional headquarters. Those particular firms, but specific units may have different levels of authority and autonomy. And even then, if names are similar, the size could be similar. They could be doing very different level of
Different
decision
levels of
making, and we
decision
don't
making.
know that. The same goes for you. And so the one thing that I could say is think about you as a whole organization, doing the work that is meaningful, doing things that make sense, and keeping long-term strategy in mind, not just what you need today, because today I understand that you need to do that today. But if today's activity is going to be detrimental in the future, you need to be thinking very carefully about how you go about what you're doing today, because it's about what you do today will decide the future.
Fair.
So
That's
that's how I
actually,
can
there's a lot
bridging.
that happened there. There's a lot that happened there. And I really like that analogy of bread versus butter. At the end of the day, there's this phrase that I learned in India. The quality of your sleep is determined by not the position you necessarily sleep in, but by other things that are not in your control. The weather, the climate, the fan is broken, the electricity is gone,
Mm.
or a very simple thing, mosquitoes are going to attack you. The only way to save yourself is to ensure that you have a piece of cloth to cover you. Now the question is that piece of cloth long enough or not? So at the end of the day, you end up with, if I get a half a size cloth, then I'm going to most likely assume a fetal position and cover myself in that little much, because ultimately survival is more contextual at that point, right? And resources cannot. So it's like during COVID, one of the things that I really liked was when someone said, countries where social distance can be maintained will have the lowest. So we recommend everyone keep social distance. And I remember this guy in Bombay writing something simple. He says, we are six people living in a small two-bedroom flat, which is above average for Bombay city. What distance are you talking about? And that was a very profound moment for me to actually understand that we say certain things. We say 6 feet distance, and he was simply making a point. We are six people living in a two-bedroom apartment. How exactly would you want me to deploy this? And that's when I realized ideas need to be scalable. Ideas need to make sense of it. But that was a great conversation there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start wrapping up by asking a very simple question. If I were a frontline seller, and they are on the call right now, right? What's that one big change would you like them to make that would make them more powerful, more effective, more efficient in front of their customers, as well as innovative?
It's not about you.
Oof. Oof. There you go. I think I can call it quits right now, right? We're all done. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you, Irina. But no, this is brilliant. I think you just nailed it. And I see that laugh on your face because you know that Deepak has no repartee or nothing to say against that, right? Yeah. It's not about you. That's so powerful, Irina. Now, how do you know when it's becoming about you, though? I mean, are there any markers for people that typically think about themselves only? Do you see that? What behaviors would those look like?
Everyone has an ego. And if you want to be more right, then rather than doing what matters, that's where you probably already failed.
Yep.
Decide what you want. Do you want to be right? Or you want another person to feel that you have something of value to them. And
I
that's
think
how it's not about.
Yeah, it's and then the best sellers that I've seen, right? They keep the focus on the other side of the table, not on themselves. And we talk about, free consulting, or the rationale for talking to either prove that you're the smartest person in the room or because you're selling really hard. Those dynamics in general don't work very well. And I've been guilty of those because I am sometimes when you're too smart, you end up saying things or doing things which have a conflict, right? At the end of the day, I'm not the most important person in the room. The most important person in the room is that buyer. It's not the seller. The seller's job is difficult. I respect that. But ultimately, the focus on the buyer is the most critical one. I think that's the message I got from you. Now,
Yeah.
that is really powerful. Arina, if I were to summarize this, right, if there's anything in closing that you want to share with the sales community, this is your opportunity, something that you feel we didn't touch upon, something that's really deep inside and you want to get it out, what would you say as a closing to the community listening into this call?
Learn who your customer is, be obsessed with your customer, with what they want, and try to get this at the sort of into your head, the idea that you know infinitely more about your product than your customer. So the information asymmetry is there. You know this, they know this. And in order for them to actually value or evaluate your product, they need to make this leap of faith and buy it. So it's costly for them. And if you understand what is that thing that they care the most, sort of to make that jump, that will be a way to go. But for that, you need to move from scripts to the frameworks.
Frameworks. Yes. And I knew there was a punchline somewhere. Something I did promise when we started, and I want to make sure, I know I said this was the last question, but something just hit me. Irina, you are very hands-on with AI. You're an educator, and usually it's universities that are at the forefront of the way that you're also dealing with what I call the latest generation, right? You're watching these people use it. I'm a salesperson. I look at AI and I'm using it, let's say, for email writing, for LinkedIn. I'm also threatened by it, right? You keep seeing the headlines. In October 2024, Forbes had a headline: Will AI replace sales? And it kind of left the question dangling for me. So I'm going to ask you a question here. If you look at your own sphere, AI, where do you see the impacts happening? What your caution to people would be? What would you tell people to think about? And then see if you can draw some AI knowledge or some, expertise back for the sales community listening into this podcast. And I promise you, that's my last question to you.
I can only I think about what I know about AI is influenced by my own work and what I have access to. So that is a very important kind of caveat that I want to make. I'm experimenting with variety of tools. And what I see the specific challenge is that we as people, and I'm not only talking about educators, I'm talking about just as humans, we grew up currently, many of us, majority of us, we grew up with an idea that you go to the university, you have a career path, you may change some jobs, yes, but you primarily kind of somewhere in one, you stay within a lane, something like that. And now the whole raft of new skills are emerging that are becoming more important than everything that you've learned. Expertise in particular areas is probably going to be absolutely gone within a couple of years, probably. I don't know that. But
Fair.
What I see is the shift of the paradigm. So we try to operate, we try to create, we try to think that we know the rules of the game, but we're not playing that game. It's the whole paradigm that is shifting, but we're still trying to kind of bring what we know, because that's what humans do. One of
Mm.
the ways to visualize that, if we all probably, many of those who will be watching this podcast, remember the movie Interstellar, and how they had the 4-dimensional space there. So we are 3-dimensional creatures. So we have, we can, walk horizontally, even diagonally. Well, we vertically, horizontally, and then move in space. In time. Can we actually imagine 4th dimension, or can we imagine ourselves in the 4-dimensional world? No, we cannot. It's not something that I cannot comprehend. That I understand when people explain that. I can see the visually, but I cannot viscerally feel it. But I understand what it means to wake up to the next day and let's say be a day older. So my point is that we are trying to operate within a paradigm that is shifting, using the laws and kind of ideas of the previous century or previous years that we
Yeah.
have. I don't know what will happen. The only thing that I believe we should be doing, we should learn. We should learn and be curious about how that could shape us, but also be ready to learn new skills. And one of those skills is, how do you judge the quality of an AI output?
Yeah.
So, for example, now you asked about sales. If you, I don't know, maybe I don't know who will be replaced with AI. But what I do know is that human judgment is still going to be there, because the output that AI makes has to be evaluated. How do you know that that output that AI created is good? For that, you need to have expertise. You cannot just fake it. The judgment that you're making is based not on, oh, I like it, I don't like it. Doesn't work like that. You actually need to know.
Fair, fair. And now, typically, since everyone who knows me knows I like to have the last word, I actually will not comment on that because I think you captured it very, very well. Human judgment, and that's my message to salespeople also. Salespeople who will lose their jobs are going to lose their jobs to people, colleagues who are using AI to their advantage, but always using AI as a means to the end. It's not the end. So this is going to be a long conversation because I feel that AI every year or 2 years is going to keep giving us an existential crisis, right, Irina? And I'm ready for that. And maybe we bring you back on in a year's time to actually tell us, well, everything I said was wrong. Guess what? Now AI is not just viscerally impacting me, but oh my gosh, it's reading my mind. We shall see how things go there. Irina, thank you very much for the time that you've given us. And I really hope that the audience got some ideas that they can start looking at from the educator side of perspective and bring it across. There's always a lot of fun in cross pollination. And that's one of the reasons why I actually wanted you on this podcast. And thank you for living up to my expectations on this one. And
Thank you.
Irina, I will be releasing this soon. I'm going to also now, if someone were to reach out to you, how do they find you? Where exactly do you prowl the whole day?
LinkedIn would be a good
LinkedIn.
place. Please feel free to, well, you can find me. You can just Google my name, Irina Gokh, and it's not going to be difficult to find me. But LinkedIn is a place where you can contact me if you're interested in continuing the conversation. I'm particularly interested in talking about AI and how artificial intelligence and how people are using that. So I
Yep.
would really be
Yep.
glad to be part of that conversation.
Perfect. And on that note, what I will do is when the podcast is released, I will, of course, include your information at the bottom so that the teams can reach out to you. Thanks, everyone, for listening in. Arina, thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
That's it for this round. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you, Deepak.
Thank you, Arina. Bye bye.